Alright, so welcome back everybody. So for this video we're going to be going over these cards here, there's not very many of them, called Once Between Turns. Now, let's explain what that means. So these are abilities that will activate when it's not your turn. When it's another player's turn. That's what it means by Once Between Turns. When a player does something that activates these cards, and there could be a variety. There's a variety of different things that could happen. A player could do that could activate one of these cards, and so you're only going to get to do this once. So, meaning if you're playing with a bunch of players, and two of the players end up doing the exact same thing that activates this and triggers this ability, for instance, you're only going to get to do it for one of those two people. So obviously you should do it for the first person who does it, activate it, and if it happens a second time before it's your turn, then you won't get to activate it again until after your turn is done. So it's only going to happen once between each of the turns. So let's say I go, and then the next player goes, and he does an ability or does something that activates this ability. I get to activate this ability, which is when another player plays a bird in the wetlands, I gain one fish from the supply. And then player 3 goes, he also does something, he also plays a bird in the wetlands as well, but you already activated it, so now you can't. Then your player 1, again, so you're only playing with 3 players, it's back to your turn, you do your turn like normal. Player 2, he plays another bird in the wetlands. So once again, you get to activate this ability. And so you get to activate it once every turn. Once after every other turn of your turns, basically. You'll get to do it. So that's how this would work. And it's only if somebody was to do something like that. So there's only about 5 slots here in the wetlands. So you're only going to get to do this a certain amount of times depending on how many players are playing. With these abilities, though, these pink abilities, the more players, the better. If you're playing by yourself, these are basically worthless. If you're playing solo, these are basically worthless. Basically. But if you're playing with 2 people, it could still be almost pointless. You want to have at least 3 players, if not more players, if you're going to try to use these abilities and get some use out of them, for sure. So let's go over how these birds work. So once again, when another player plays a bird in the wetlands, you'll gain 1 fish from the supply. And that's the only bird with that ability for the wetlands. The next one here, the eastern kingbird, has a similar ability, but it's only for the forest, and you'll gain 1 invertebrate from the supply. Alright, this one is also a little bit different from those two, and it's also very unique. It's also considered a flocking power as well. So here's another bird with a flocking ability, but it's in pink instead of brown. So this one you'll do once between turns. When another player plays a bird in the savannah, tuck a bird from your hand behind this bird. So that's what you get to do. This is the only time you'll get to tuck birds behind this bird, is when a player plays a bird here in the savannah. This is the savannah here. That's still a pretty interesting ability. If you get this in the beginning of the game, it's most likely that there'll be a few players putting some birds here because they're going to want to get as many eggs as possible. And so the savannah is a very popular place to put bird cards, for sure. So you might get to activate this a few times, but you're only going to get to activate it once between turns. Alright. The Barrel's Goldeneye. This bird here, once between turns, when another player takes the lay eggs action, this bird lays 1 egg on another bird with a cavity nest. Well, that's really cool. That will happen quite a bit, because if you do not take the lay eggs action, you're only going to be able to put birds in the first column, because the other columns require eggs. So you'll never likely do that. You're going to do this action quite a bit through the game. And so if you get this in the beginning of the game, you're going to be getting to do this quite a bit. But it only works is if you have another bird with a cavity nest, or another bird with a wild nest. So that's something to note. But you'll get to lay an egg on the other bird if it's a cavity or a wild nest. So that's still pretty cool. This one is exactly the same as the last one, but it's a bowl nest instead of a cavity nest. This one is also a bowl nest. So is this one. This one is a ground nest. And that's it for those birds that have the ability for pink. And there's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's 5 birds in that category that do that ability. We still have a few more here. Okay, the turkey vulture here. When another player's hunt or fishing succeeds, gain 1 food dice from the bird feeder. So basically, you'll get to take one of these food dices out. You'll get the corresponding food, of course, for it from the supply. But that's what that means you'll get to do, but only when a player has a successful hunt or a successful fishing. If it's successful in fishing or successful in hunting, will you get to do this ability. If they don't even have any of those abilities, hunting or fishing, then this one isn't going to give you any possibilities. So you might want to keep an eye on what birds your opponents are playing and what abilities they have, because if they don't have hunting or fishing, this may not be worth putting in your player board for sure. But it's a cool ability. If there's somebody that does it, you should definitely try to get this if you can. And then it's only going to work once between turns if there's a successful hunt or somebody was able to fish successfully. And the next one, the black vulture, has the same ability as the turkey vulture. And so does the black-billed magpie. It also has the same ability as well. Okay, there's only 1 bird left in this whole game to go over. Alright, this one is the loggerhead shrike. I think that's how you would pronounce it, shrike. Anyways, once between turns, when another player takes the gain food action, if they gain any number of rodents, also gain 1 rodent from the supply and cash it on this card. So, obviously, if they take the lay food action and they take a rodent from, and it doesn't matter how many, they could take 1, they could take 2, they could take a whole lot more. But as long as they take 1 of these rodent dices out of the birdhouse, when it's not your turn, obviously, you can activate this ability, and then you'll gain 1 of these rodents from the supply, and then you'll get to cash it on this card. So here's another caching food bird type of card as well. And that is all of the abilities that these birds have. So obviously that's it for the base game. If you have the expansion, you guys are going to have to wait until I get the expansion. But for me to explain those birds, because I haven't even bothered to look. I want it to be a surprise when I do finally buy the expansion for Wingspan. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you guys again soon. See you guys next time.